All right, so today I want to talk about another very insightful tweet from Zuby Music saying, how many times do giant corporations and giant governments need to screw you before you realize they don't care about you beyond your money and your votes? There should be bipartisan awareness on this, and it's a very good point. Like, I can't stress enough how good of a point it is. Now, the problem that the big thing that they get people on is that they always distract people away from the people that, whenever there's a problem in society, they always distract people away from who's really to blame, right? In that you look at the wealth gap, right? The wealth gap and poverty and all this stuff. Well, who's to blame for that? It is mainly giant corporations and governments, right? And it's not a lack thereof, right? It isn't a lack thereof. It is simply they are the ones that are screwing us, and it's not the greedy rich people or any of that kind of stuff. It's not greedy corporations, and that number one, corporations are one and of the government. This is one of the areas where the progressives and the more far lefts go completely wrong, and that they think that greedy corporations is a byproduct of capitalism, right? But again, they have absolutely no idea what they're talking about, right? And that these people's arguments is you can't have too much of a free market because then corporations will have too much power. Well, again, they got absolutely no idea what they're talking about because the concept of a corporation is a legal fiction created and granted by government, right? So if anything, the exact opposite is true. Like, if anything, the exact opposite is true because if there was no government, there would be no corporations, right? So, and the other big thing too, that the biggest problem when it comes to corporations, I believe, is the fact that the people running the corporations can shield themselves from immunity, right? So if you run a corporation and you do massive amounts of harm to people, or you lie, you cheat, you steal, you won't ever lose your house, you won't ever lose any of the money you made. I mean, unless maybe you will lose a little bit of your money you made, but at the end of the day, you won't face nearly as many consequences as if you were running a traditional business, right? So that is the biggest problem that when it comes to corporations, right? So again, the progressives go completely wrong in that they think that we need more government so we can regulate the corporations, but what they don't understand is that, again, like, do you not understand what fascism or communism is? Communism is the government is the corporations, basically, and fascism is the government and the corporations basically partner up. In that fascism, there is still some remnants of the free market, but at the end of the day, it's still pretty much the same thing. So if you're worried about big corporations having too much power, you wouldn't be pushing for a bigger government. So again, like, the progressives literally get it. The exact opposite of what they think is true is true. Literally the exact opposite. I'm not being hyperbolic at all there. Um, the problem that the right faces, again, the right isn't guilty as any of this stuff as the left, but the biggest problem that the right faces, and again, you look at Canada, well, most people on the right, well, what are they worried about? It's simply, how do we get Trudeau out of office, right? How do we get Trudeau out of office? But what they don't understand is that Trudeau isn't what we're worried about. It's Trudeau's ideas, right? Because to be quite honest, let's just say Justin Trudeau was forced to step down tomorrow. Do you really think that someone any less radical than him would take his place? Like, of course not. If anything, I think it would be worse. So that's something people need to realize on the right, is that it's not simply a, we need to be worried about Trudeau, or just worried about the NDP in Alberta. That's not the worry. The worry is the ideas of these people. And the problem with having with having these beliefs is that what has happened is that the conservatives at a federal level have basically they've moved to the left. Even the UCP has moved a little to the left as well, and that there's no such thing as traditional conservatives anymore. That's just not the case, right? And if there is, they're viciously vilified, like the Derek Sloans of the world, right? It would be an example of a traditional conservative. And even though I would acknowledge I don't agree with him on everything, that should be obvious to people. He is a lot more of a traditional conservative than O'Toole, Scheer, pretty most of these prominent conservatives, right? So that is another very important point here too. But when it comes to the giant corporations, it's not that they're screwing you. It's not that I mean they are screwing you. They are greedy, but it's not in the way people think. For the simple reason being that the left solution is simply, oh, let's just raise taxes, right? Let's just raise taxes. Well, that's not going to get us anywhere. That's not going to get us anywhere because the corporations and the governments are buddy buddy no matter which side is in power. Doesn't This is another way that the left is absolutely insane, is that they genuinely believe that um, one's susceptibility to corruption depends on your political worldview, that basic human psychology differs based on your political worldview, which is absolutely insane to suggest, but that's literally what they believe. So, again, the main point I would bring up is that the left is a lot worse than the right on this, in that the left thinks that the giant corporations are actually their friend. And not to mention, too, the left is wrong on this. It's not that they've always been wrong, in that if you go back, 20 or 30 years, it was the left that was the ones that were better on this when it came to the big corporations and stuff. Now they're the ones that are worse. And the reason that they're the ones that are worse now is that the left perceives them as helping them, right? The left perceives um, Google and YouTube and Facebook and all these big tech platforms, right? They perceive them, them censoring things as benefiting them. But at the end of the day, it will benefit them in some ways. But at the end of the day, it's not going to help them either, because when you censor other ideas, in the long run, it doesn't help because it just creates a Streisand effect. And number two, it may make things even worse. And number three, too, is that for all the cancel culture people out there too, um, they genuinely believe that it's just going to be this person, or it's just going to be this crazy person or that crazy person. But again, what they don't understand is that when you open up the door to canceling people for this, then you just open up the door more and more and more and more until hardly anyone is left, right? So that's another thing they don't realize. And again, the left is worse at this stuff because the left, they're the ones that they watch more mainstream media. They're the one they are the ones that see something on Facebook and just blindly assume that it's true. And again, the way we know that too is that the left would bring up too is, oh, how many right wingers I know watch Fox News. Again, yeah, that's true to an extent, but if you look at the numbers, um, right wingers are more skeptical of the mainstream media than left wingers, right? The numbers are very clear on that. So again, even though there is a lot of right wingers that believe propaganda, as a whole, they are less likely. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is, again, I simply just want to be honest with people, right? Because although both sides need to improve, it is the left that is worse on this. But um, as far as bipartisan too, I mean, look at the whole GameStop thing. Like, look at the GameStop thing, and that this was something that you'd think that it should be bipartisan, but yet still, how many articles did you see of, oh, it's white supremacists and the Russians that are doing this stuff? Like, again, like people, the big problem at the end of the day too is that people are so susceptible to propaganda these days that it's not even funny. Like, it's really not even funny how susceptible people are to propaganda these days. I think that's the biggest problem. Um, but the main point here too is that people need to recognize that these people aren't helping us. Now, I think another reason why more people don't realize this, and something that he should, maybe he recognizes, I'm not sure. But again, when you are on the left, right, one of the basic tenets of a leftist, the leftist psychology, the genes even, is that they want a bigger government, right? And a bigger government basically needs bigger and more powerful corporations, right? Because the corporations grow in large part due to them paying government to pass legislation that benefits them, right? That's basically how a lot of these corporations have gotten so big. Not that they wouldn't be big otherwise, but part of the reason they've got so big is because the government has supported them in doing that, right? Um, but again, the leftist, political playbook is essentially, we need a bigger and bigger government. So, and not to mention too, a lot of right wingers just support that too. Like, a lot of right wingers do as well. How many people out there do you know that still plan to vote conservative, right? At least at a federal level. Like, a lot of people, without realizing that. Aaron O'Toole is, and the Conservatives in their current form is at best slightly better than Justin Trudeau and the Liberals. Slightly better, I would say. Um, I mean, there's maybe only a handful of things that I can think of. I mean, there's actually only one or two things I can think of off the top of my head to where they're actually better than the Liberals. And the thing about those things too is that I'm not even fully confident they would actually go through with it, right? So there is nothing that I am very confident in saying that the Liberals, or sorry, the Conservatives are better than the Liberals on. So again, I want to make that very clear that this isn't. I don't mean this in any way a partisan issue too, but the one thing, like I said, that people can't deny too is that one of the fundamental aspects of the leftist political worldview is that they want a bigger government. There's no way around that. You can't have a welfare state or UBI or hate speech laws without a bigger and more powerful government, which will coincide with a bigger and powerful corporations. And I think the other tenet of the leftist worldview that makes this even so much worse, and why I think they're a lot more responsible for this too, is that they're largely people that never admit they're wrong. I mean, you look at California, you look at all these areas, right? That you look at the amount of people that have died in the name of communism over the 20th century. Like they will never admit they're wrong, right? And that if they implement a policy under the guise of whatever, and it doesn't work out, their idea is always we didn't go far enough. It's never, oh, we tried it, it didn't work, let's not do it again. It's never that. It's always we didn't go far enough, which is why the corporations and the governments have gotten so big. That is why they've gotten so big, I believe, is because if you implement a little bit of taxes to redistribute wealth, and it doesn't help the gap between the rich and the poor gets even bigger, it must be because we didn't do it enough. And then they increase taxes more, the problem doesn't get any better, it must mean we didn't increase it enough. And eventually, I mean, we're well on this path. Eventually, we're going to get to the point where the entire system collapses, I believe. Um, and I think the funny thing about that too is that still won't get a lot of these people to admit they were wrong and they were duped, right? So yeah, I mean that's basically what I wanted to bring up today. So anyway, if you liked the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure you check out those links below. Follow me on those other platforms. If you want to donate, you can do that as well. Again, I would very much appreciate whatever support I can get. But like I said, at the very least, just hit that like and subscribe and stay tuned for more.